Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene the fourth of 5 programs on women's history of changing the world. As we begin today, I want to note, as we did yesterday, that this is Holy Week for both the Jews and the Christians. It was Passover yesterday. Today is what they call Maundy Thursday, Holy Thursday. Maundy comes from the Latin word meaning commandment. This was the day in which Jesus washed the feet of the disciples and they had their Last Supper. I would like to call up the image that all of you have in your mind of the Last Supper after Jesus had washed the feet of the disciples. And I would imagine that most of you would think of Jesus and 12 men around the table, one of which was his beloved disciple who placed his head on Jesus's bosom, which is the iconic image of John, the beloved disciple. And I want to invite you to consider that the beloved disciple was not a man, but a woman. The historical research that's coming out of the Nag Hammadi texts that were uncovered about 50 years ago in Egypt, where in addition to the 4 canonical gospels, there is now scores of gospels, books written at that time, around 2,000 years ago, is indicating more and more conclusively that Mary Magdalene was the beloved disciple, that Mary Magdalene was the consort of Jesus, the lover of Jesus, according to the Gospel of the Beloved Companion that has been recently translated, that came out of France. Mary Magdalene was actually the wife of Jesus. They had several children. According to a number of the Nag Hammadi Gospels, Mary Magdalene, in fact, was the mediator between Jesus and the depth of his teachings and wisdom and the 12 disciples who didn't quite get it until after Jesus had been crucified and rose the 3rd day. And that's recorded in the 4 canonical gospels, that the disciples never quite understood what was going on until after the resurrection. And Mary Magdalene was the one who did. And that caused quite a bit of consternation, which was also recorded in the various gospels. And that Mary Magdalene was the woman that Jesus truly and deeply loved. And after his ascension, she was in controversies with the 12 disciples, particularly Peter, the head of the disciples, and she was sort of ostracized. She went to Alexandria in Egypt, according to tradition, and it was there that she actually wrote what is now called the Gospel of John, which emphasizes the disciple who Jesus loved. And as you all know from your general memory, the Gospel of John is the most spiritually elevated, the most theologically complex of all the Gospels. And it was attributed to Mary Magdalene increasingly now by modern scholars. And then, of course, the tradition has that she went to France with Joseph of Arimathea, who went on to Glastonbury in England, and Mary Magdalene stayed in France. And you can actually visit places where she ministered to people, and there she passed after a long and rich life. And if you go to Chartres Cathedral, one of the stained glasses there show her ascension into heaven as a great and noble personage of the early Christian tradition. But when we think of women's history of changing the world, Mary Magdalene on this day of Holy Thursday was crucial to not only Jesus's life and ministry, but the articulation of what became the Christian religion after his passing. And if you re-look at Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, which you can Google, you'll note that to his right is a clean-shaven individual who scholars have believed was actually a woman, which, given Leonardo da Vinci's genius with the Mona Lisa, was depicted with such ambiguity that the controversy remains to the present day. And one final thought. The first crusade, the first inquisition of the Catholic Church, was not against the Muslims in the Middle East. It was against the Cathars in France, who honored Mary Magdalene and revered her and placed her alongside Jesus in their theology. And this struck such terror in the patriarchal governing structures of the Catholic Church that they sought to wipe them out in the early 11th century. And so it's worth remembering that as we consider women's history of changing the world, that women for thousands of years have had to shape history, but have done so under the extraordinary duress of patriarchal, coercive subordination. And yet, like Mary Magdalene and many of the women we've considered this week, they have risen to power and potency in a way that has shaped even the fundamentals of Christian theology. So thank you, everyone. Before we dive into our program, let us breathe together as we always do on Humanity Rising in the moment. For those of you who are new, you'll hear the sound of a bell. When you hear the bell, just breathe in very slowly for about 5.5 seconds. You'll hear another bell, then just breathe out for about 5.5 seconds. And as we breathe together today, let us just hold all the women who over the eons of time have made crucial differences by overcoming obstacles that no man ever had to deal with, and yet have illuminated our world. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. It's always good to breathe as one in this chaotic world of ours. It's now my pleasure and privilege to introduce my good friend, Tom Eddington, who you all know because he's a constant fixture here on Humanity Rising and is one of the executive leadership as we evolve Humanity Rising into Humanity Rising Network. He's passionate about the environment as the CEO and founder of Endangered.global. He's an executive coach, a very successful business executive in his own right, also passionate about nonviolence and also democracy, and has been convening numerous programs, including this program this week on women's history of changing the world. So Tom, thank you so much, and I turn the program over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. It's been an extraordinary week so far, and I'm delighted that we'll continue the conversation this week. I was noticing in the chat this morning, somebody said, now can we learn from history? And part of the challenge about learning from history is we actually have to know history, and not just the history written by the victors, but history in its full context, in all of the elements, all of the dimensions of history, from all of the voices. And so part of what we're delighted and able to do this week is to share an expanded understanding of history. And I'm delighted that we're able to focus on the history as lived and created and written by women, but especially African-American women. And I'm just honored to be in conversation and dialogue this week with the extraordinary women that we've had. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists for today, and we're going to be shifting slightly from what we've done the last 3 days. So let me start with Stuart Sender, who's joining us. Stuart is a writer, filmmaker, showrunner, and teacher whose work has been nominated for 2 Academy Awards for Best Documentary, Prisoner of Paradise and The Garden. He's won Emmy Awards and a Polk Award for Excellence in Journalism. Most recently, Stuart was a co-executive producer of 2 series for Netflix, Meltdown, 3 Mile Island, and a 4-episode series about the role of whistleblowers in exposing the worst nuclear accident in the U.S. history, an Emmy-winning music series, Remastered. I'm particularly interested in having Stuart with us today because of his role in producing and directing the first exclusive interview with Nelson Mandela following his release from prison, and the work he's currently doing to bring to center stage the life of Dr. Jocelyn Elders, who will be joining us today. In addition, I'd like to welcome Dr. Sonny Whedon. Dr. Whedon has been in practice since 1980, first as a marriage and family therapist, and then as a psychologist since 1991. She's maintained offices in Newport Beach and Novato, California, where she treats individuals, couples, and families. She's specialized in the diagnosis and treatment of chemical dependency in many forms since 1985, as well as the treatment of severe PTSD, beginning with Vietnam combat veterans. She regularly consults to treatment organizations across the U.S. and has been selected twice as a presenter at the Tibetan Medical Society by invitation of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. In addition, Dr. Whedon is an award-winning author, having written Many Blessings, a tapestry of accomplished African-American women, which is a compilation of 30 interviews with amazing African-American women and 8 ways to well-being for recovering people. She's currently working with Stuart on bringing together a documentary of the life and life's work and impact of our national treasure and former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Jocelyn Elders. And we're waiting for Dr. Elders to join us. She should be with us momentarily, but I'll just make a quick introduction of her. Dr. Elders is an American pediatrician and public health administrator who served as Surgeon General of the U.S. from 93 to 94. She's a Vice Admiral of the Public Health Service Commission Corps. She was the second woman second person of color and first African American to serve as Surgeon General. And she's currently a professor emerita of pediatrics at the University of Arkansas for medical science. So welcome, Dr. Elders, welcome, Dr. Whedon, and welcome, Stuart. Delighted to be in conversation with all of you today.
Unmute me.
Glad to be in conversation with you.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
We can't hear. Hold on. Where's your speaker? Yes.
We can hear you.
Yeah,
We can hear you and
fine.
see you, Dr. Elders. Yeah.
We can hear you fine, and we can see you.
So while we're waiting for them to get everything set up, are you all set, Dr. Elders?
We're ready. I'm so stressed out. My brain doesn't know anything, but I'm here.
It still looks fine to us, and you sound fine.
Okay. Hold on. Okay, now you good. Okay.
Good.
Fantastic.
We're delighted to have you with us today. We can see you, we can hear you, and are really looking forward to this conversation.
Past. I need to put on. That's all right. Let's go ahead. I was gonna put on some lipstick, but
No. Don't worry about that.
I'm so stressed out. I can't think of it.
Well, welcome and delighted to have you with us today.
A pleasure to be here, and I meant to be on time.
Well, we've been focusing this week on honoring and celebrating and helping our audience around the world know a bit about the contribution of African American women here in the U.S. in changing history. And you've certainly been a pathfinder and a leader in some extraordinary ways, not only as U.S. Surgeon General, but before and after being in that position. So we very much welcome you. And part of what we've talked about this week is what your journey has been like. And, here in the US in particular, we have a certain way that we think about leaders and qualities of leaders. And you have been an extraordinary leader in your own way. And I'd love to hear a bit about how you think about leadership and how you've chosen to be so outspoken in sharing the truth and sharing the reality of life. And you've been criticized for it at times. It's been difficult for you at times, but you've spoken what people needed to hear. And so I would very much welcome your thoughts and comments.
I think when I think of leadership, I guess I really didn't start about thinking about leadership growing up in a very tiny rural community, population 99. We didn't have any electricity. We had outdoor plumbing. And so and people often ask me, did I always want to be the Surgeon General? How could I ever dream of being the Surgeon General when I never even saw a doctor until I entered college? Well, and the nearest doctor was 13 miles away. And my dad had to take my brother, who had a ruptured appendix, on the back of a mule, 13 miles. So you see, but I knew about difficulty with healthcare in a poor rural community, and especially if you were Black. So we didn't know about all of the other races. We only knew in Southern Arkansas, we knew your Black people and white people. That was the only thing we knew. So, but I also knew that I wanted to get out of the cotton patch. That was the driving force for me. The driving, when you think about leadership, that was the driving leadership ability. I was the oldest of 8. So I had to grow up wanting to be, having to lead my sisters and brothers as we worked in the fields all day. You learn a lot about getting things done when you've got only your sisters and brothers to in the fields by by themselves, by ourselves all day. So I learned how to, if I wanted to get them to work for me and what we had to get done and what I needed to do. So in that sense, I learned about leadership. But when I think about leadership, and now even all my life, I've always kind of used the word, if you will, leader, learn. For the L, I felt that if you're going to go and help a community, you've got to go to that community, learn what that community needs, learn what they want, and learn how you can best deliver what it is that they feel that they want. But you got to educate yourself about that community, and educate how you can get them to do it. Because what you want them to do, if you want to change, is what you want them to do once you leave. You know, not just what you want them to do while you're sitting there, it's what you want them to carry on. And so you've got to convince them of what to do. And for the D, to make sure they remember, you've got to be determined. You know, you've got to feel that you have a good goal. You've got to be determined to get that goal done. And so, you know, I would always, with my sisters and brothers in the mornings when we would go to the fields, I would tell them what we wanted to accomplish by the end of the day, what we needed to do to get there. So their aims and goals was the same as mine. You know, if I just went out there and got started and I never told them anything, it's a lot harder. But if they're feeling that if we get to this row or when we get to this, we're going home. So they worked very hard to try to get there. You know, and one of the other things I really learned in being a leader and trying to lead, going into a community, you've got to know who you can depend on. We're talking about responsibility. Who's responsible? And so, you know, I took it up on my job as the kind of for my sisters and brothers. I'm sorry, I'm using my sisters and brothers in this way, but if I learned leadership, that's where I learned it from. And that it was my responsibility. And I always try to empower them, praise them for what they've done, praise them for having done a good job, praise them for helping to get to the end of the road. And so to me, that was, when I think of leadership, that's how I think of it, because we've got to learn what we need, what's needed, learn how to get it done, and learn how to go about doing it. Educate, empower the people we want done, who's going to be responsible. And so to me, that's how when you ask me about leadership, that's how I think of leadership. And that's how I always approached it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Sunny and Stuart, I'd love to bring you into the conversation. How did the two of you get connected with Dr. Elders, and what inspired you to embark on this project of making a film about her life?
Well, I'll start. Thank you. I met Dr. Elders many years ago in the course of writing a book highlighting the lives of very accomplished African-American women. And I have friends in Little Rock, Dr. Rick Smith. I called Rick Smith and I said, Rick, do you know Dr. Elders? And he said, oh, yes, she was one of my professors in medical school. And I said, well, would you introduce me to Dr. Elders? Because I just had it in my mind that I really wanted to interview her. I wanted to understand how this woman had risen to a point of power. And I just wanted to know about her. And so Rick made that introduction, and I went and interviewed Dr. Elders at her home. And there was just something about her. It's very hard to explain, but she's incredibly inspirational. Just the little bit that she's told you about her life is so inspiring to me. And so, I wrote that book, and it was kind of an interesting project for a blonde from Newport Beach to be writing about African-American women. But the project was brought to me, is all I can say. It was brought to me. It was something from my heart that I wanted to do, that I wanted to get out there for more understanding. My mentor, Angeles Arian, said, Sunny, this is bridge work. We need to make more bridges. Go do it. You have to do it. So that got done. And some years later, one of the women in the book, Vicki Stringer, called me and said, you need to start making movies of the women in the book. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. I'm a psychologist every day. I don't know how to make films. But the idea stayed with me. And after a series of non-starts, I would start, but it would be really terrible, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had contacted the old football player, Thomas Henderson, for something else, and a whole other project. And in that period of time, I said, oh, and Thomas, I want to make this film of Dr. Elders, but I've got to figure out how to do it. And he said, oh, I'll get you a filmmaker. And I'll tell him he'll make the deal for $5,000. Well, I had been quoted $75,000 for a trailer, just for the trailer. So I said, okay. And he made the deal. And another man who I did not know, but I've come to know, Robert Rooks, was introduced to me. And I told Robert Rooks about this project. He was the director of California Safe and Just, which is about prison reform, reallocating money that currently goes to incarceration to education, drug and alcohol treatment, mental health treatment, job creation, job training, human ecology. And he said, if you'll get me a conversation, a telephone call with Dr. Elders, I'll get you the money you need to make this little film. Well, that happened. And I was named the liaison between the Surgeon General and California Safe and Just. Robert has gone on now to direct Reform Alliance in New York, doing the same kind of work. And so he was really the godfather of my first little trial balloon. And during that time, of course, I kept in close contact with Dr. Elders. We made a 16-minute video, and that premiered at her alma mater, Philander Smith College, on December 16th, 2021. I think Dr. Elders would agree it was a magnificent event. A big luncheon was given at the Clinton Library for us. 75 people came. Bill Clinton wrote a personal letter that I was able to get to Dr. Elders, praising her work in the world, thanking her. And that was bridge work also, because they had not spoken in many, many years. So I saw that as sort of a peacemaking bridge work kind of a thing. So it's one of those things that just sort of on and on and on it went. And then I knew that I wanted to make the bigger documentary. But again, I had no idea how to do it. And this is the story of how I became connected to Stuart Sender, which I'll tell you a little backstory. For many years, my husband and I have supported an orphanage in northern India. We have a friend who's a Tibetan Buddhist monk, has 28 kids that he has taken care of, mostly girls, a few boys. Since they were young children, many of them have master's degrees now, so he's raised these kids. I had done a fundraiser for Lama in Southern California, and in the morning he said, would you drive me to LA? I need to be dropped off at one of my sponsors' homes. And I said, oh, sure. So my friend Patty and I drove him to this house. We didn't know where we were going. We went in, brought his luggage in, dropped it off, said hello to the man, who turned out to be Stuart Sender, where Lama was staying. And so it was a very chance meeting. And when I was thinking about, all right, who am I going to get? Who am I going to partner with to make this larger documentary? My younger son, Simon, said, Mom, what about Stuart Sender? Because Simon had gone to Stuart's house to meditate with Lama Tenzin. And I thought, oh, that's right. Well, I don't know if Stuart Sender's going to remember me, but I'll call him up. So I called him up. And Stuart said he vaguely remembered me. And there it was.
Not vaguely, Sonny, I remember.
Not vague. He remembered me. All right. So, I mean, I think 10 years had passed between those two events of my first dropping Lama at your house, Stuart, and then me calling you to say, come on, we have this Dr. Joyce on Elders. She's so amazing. Her story is out of this world, inspirational, and we've got to do this. And so off we started. And I was able to raise enough money for us to make the first foray. Actually, it's a year ago this week. Stuart gathered his colleagues and we went to Little Rock and we filmed Dr. Elders in her home. We filmed her college. We filmed her husband, her brother, Reverend Chester Jones. Stuart and his colleagues took the drone way out in the country where Dr. Elders was born and filmed out there. So we've got a lot already, and we're going to do some more. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Stuart. Now I've told my story about how I met Dr. Elders, but I want to say one last thing. When I have a hard day, when I think, oh, I just don't know if I can go on, really and truly, Dr. Elders, I think of you. And I think, well, Dr. Elders is still out there working and doing stuff. And she's older than I am by quite a ways, 15 years or so. If she can do it, I can do it. If Dr. Elders can pick all that cotton and get herself to college and all that, I can get through this day. And so Dr. Elders is like, she doesn't know it, but she's sort of an internal mentor for me. And for many days, I say, if Dr. Elders can do it, so can I. To you, Stuart.
Well, that's lovely.
Yes, it is.
It really is.
You always say such nice things, and I'm grateful.
Me too.
Well, I think people really need to hear more from Dr. Elders. I just want to say that it's been a real privilege to get to speak with you, to hear your biography. John, you were asking about what does leadership mean? And the example that Dr. Elders has set for us. I don't know if people who are listening know what a sharecropper is, but Dr. Elders grew up in a family that were sharecroppers, and she can tell you more about that. As she said, she didn't even meet a doctor until she was 16 and then became the Surgeon General of the United States. That's an extraordinary journey. So, Dr. Elders, I don't know how much more you want to tell people about, how you got from that place in Shaw, Arkansas to, working in the White House. That's the title of our film right now, is From the Cotton Fields to the White House. And that example that you set, there's no kind of better example of leadership than a life lived the way you've lived yours. And when I had a chance to initially say hello to Dr. Elders, and I was just so struck by her brilliance and her sense of humor and joy and the impact that she's made. You've made such an extraordinary impact in the world. And I think when we talk about Black women, one of the things that comes up for me is your testimony when you were nominated for the Surgeon General job, and that there were senators who didn't realize that you were actually a medical doctor. And I think that's another piece of this, the racism and the sexism that you've overcome. And I kind of want to stop talking and let you talk about it. But these are some of the things that I really think about and have really been impacted by in getting to know you and spending a few days interviewing you and thinking about your life.
Yeah, thank you both. And Dr. Elders, when I think about part of my understanding of your journey, what you've had to deal with your entire life is ignorance.
Yes.
And I'd love to explore that with you and have you share where you've had to bump up against it, whether it was, as Stuart was just sharing, senators not knowing that you were a doctor, talking about women's rights for being able to control their own body. We could go on and on. You've confronted ignorance time and time again in your career and your life, and have done it in a very incredible and powerful way. And so I'll just open that up to a broad conversation around the life you've lived and the journey you've traveled and the ignorance you've had to confront over and over again.
Well, thank you. When I think of that, when I think of what I've accomplished, what I'm most proud of, well, first of all, I guess I'm most proud of being able to get out of the cotton patch, but I feel that that's something maybe that I worked on myself, getting me out of the cotton patch. But I'm most proud of when I think of all of that I hear from, often the young, not only Black women, but white women who feel that I've made such an impact on their careers. I wasn't aware that I was making impact, but I did what I felt needed to be done to make a difference in their lives. In fact, most recently, there was this young black woman. She's a doctor, but she's the medical director for Blue Cross Blue Shield industry for all of Arkansas. And she heard that one day, she heard that I was ill, I wasn't feeling well. She left her job, came over, did a COVID test. This is how recent this was, but I see her all the time. Did a COVID test, found that I was COVID positive. She went to the drugstore, got the medicine, and they said, well, they couldn't give the medicine until after. So she said, I need this now. So she brought it back, and she was very insistent that I take. Well, I don't feel, she wasn't that underprivileged. Her dad was the Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton, so I'm not trying to pretend she's poor. But yeah, I started out really wanting to make a difference for young Black women in the Delta who didn't understand one thing about contraceptives. We're sexual beings from the day we were born until the day we die. But we never wanted to educate young people about their sexuality. And I was absolutely determined that I wanted to make a difference for those young women. And because, every day I would walk and say, except for the grace of God, there goes I. Because that was the kind of difference that I wanted to make. And I feel that for many of them, I made a difference. They're, and every day, I want to keep doing that. I want to keep making a difference. And so that's what keeps me going. Another one is a major leader and director for the Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. And, I just talked with her yesterday. They call and I talk with them, and I think of all of the young women all over the country. One of them is a dean down in Texas, and she calls and want to have dinner with me. So, but these are not young people that I didn't know I was making a difference at the time. I was just doing what I felt needed to be done.
Well, one of the things that we explored earlier this week with our guest, and I'm hearing it in what you're sharing, is that you weren't motivated by your own personal interests or what was going to help you. It was about being of service to others.
That's true. I never really thought when I was never really thinking of how is it going to benefit me. Now, I'm not trying to be saying that I never thought of me now. I'm not, because I did. But when I was out trying to make a difference and help other people, my aim of the game was to do everything I could that would make a difference for them. And if it helped me, that was wonderful, but I didn't think of it. And when I thought of getting out of the cotton patch, let me tell you, I was the first of 8, and I wanted to make sure that all of my sisters and brothers got out of the cotton patch and made a difference. And, I'm very proud of all of them. Still, they're still doing good things. I'm still proud of them. I felt like a mother hen all these years.
Yeah, it's a when we explore different kinds of leadership, it's a very different way of thinking about being of service to others and wanting to help others. Of course, you're going to benefit from doing good work, but it's very much around being of service to others. And so I'm just curious, really going back to the comment that Stuart made earlier. Can you share a bit more about your journey from, how did you go to college, for example, from the cotton field, and what led you from college to the White House?
Well, if you want to know, to get out of the cotton patch, my sisters and brothers, let me say this, the United Methodist Women offered me a scholarship to Philander Smith College, which is a Black college here in Little Rock. It was really considered, probably at the time, it was one of the best colleges for Black people in Arkansas. It still is a good school, but doesn't have quite that distinction, but still a good school. But the aim of Philander Smith College was to just social justice and leadership. And they were always really pushing leadership. But the United Methodist Women gave me a scholarship. It was a tuition scholarship. But my sisters and brothers picked cotton for me to get bus fare to Little Rock. It was $3.33. I'll never forget it. And so I took the bus to Little Rock to attend Philander Smith College. And I scrubbed floors. They gave us jobs to do things to make a difference. But I still had to earn $8 a month to help pay for my room and board. If you can imagine, $8 a month. But that was then. That was a few days ago. Really dating myself now as to how young I am. Then the last 2 years, I was able to work as a maid for a family out in what was called the Heights then. And that was a wonderful experience for me. It was the less work I've ever done, even though I worked hard. She had 2 daughters, and they were going to school, private school down in South Carolina. But when I graduated from college, the only 3 people at my graduation that was for me, we were talking about graduation for me, was the lady who I worked for and her 2 daughters. And I was very proud. Her name is Eva Moore Martin. And she always told me to arrange my schedule such that I could go to school and be able to get get home for dinner. Because see, I had to fix her breakfast and catch the bus to go to Philander Smith, and then I had to get back home to fix dinner, but that was my very minor problem. But anyway, it was easy for me to go to college. And the other thing that I felt was really very helpful, that was college. I took, I would really take a very large load, and so I graduated from college in 3 years. I started college when I was 15. I graduated when I was 18. So, but I didn't have any money for any in betweens. But the fact that I worked the full time, and this woman allowed the opportunity to work. So that was a big help to me. And she always say, if you have anything, if you have a test, if you have some, so I'm just saying, whereas I was good and helped other young women, but I can never forget the help the young people gave to me. And the story that I remember the most, and I tell often, and it really is about pennies. I was at the bus station in Hot Springs. The Hot Springs at that time, the buses, the white side and the black side. I was going home from Philander Smith College, and I wanted to take my sisters and brothers something, I haven't been away from August until December. And there was a thing of Baby Ruth candy that was 35 cents. But in Arkansas, we have a tax. So it was 39 cents, wherever it was. But anyway, the long story short, I only had 35 cents. And so there was a lady, a white lady, I say white because, there was a black side and a white side. But she saw me, and I guess she saw me looking so forlorn. And when I was turning away, well, she told me, she says, little girl, here. Not that I was that small of a girl, but she said, here, I'll pay the other 3 pennies. And do you know, for this day, even if I had back surgery, and even if I had to lay down on my stomach to pick up a penny, I cannot pass a penny. On the floor, in the halls, any place. And some young man who was working for us, helping to clean up some apartments and doing that, they said, we have to make sure we pick up get all the pennies. Said, that's Miss Elder's work for the day. So, but I'm just saying, it showed me, that one lady showed me the importance of a penny. In fact, I will probably pick up a penny before I'll even pick up $1, but that's not true. But the value of money, and I'll never forget what that meant to me, and also how much it meant to my sisters and brothers that I had bought them this box of candy. You see, we never had stuff like that, because, as I said, we weren't what they call welfare poor. Now we were less than that. We had almost nothing. And when I think of what they had to do to get me to college, well, that was to college, and I worked the full time, graduated in 3 years. Then I was in the Army, joined the Army to become a physical therapist. Learned, because I graduated from college, I could go to physical therapy school down in Brooke Army Medical Center. And I learned to be a physical therapist, and I was a physical therapist for the 3 years, and then I ended up applying for medical school and used the GI Bill to support my medical school for 4 years. That's how I went to medical school. So I didn't work while I was in medical school. I did, but I learned to live on I learned to live on what you got on the GI Bill, which is very little. But I made it.
Dr. Elders, I'm going to interrupt you here because I want to say something about this. It seems like what you had this vision, I want to be a doctor, and then you had to be clever to figure out how to get, from here to there. You've had your degree, now how am I going to get? And so joining the Army was part of your plan, your
Yes.
clever plan. It was a vision to keep that vision moving forward and not be daunted. I think also the audience would probably like to know you were the physical therapy for Dwight Eisenhower when he had a heart attack.
That's right.
And that your time in the Army gave you the GI Bill, which gave you the opportunity to apply to the University of Arkansas. And I think it's important to say the University of Arkansas was segregated at that time. So you were applying to a segregated university, very small chance of being accepted.
Very small chance of being accepted. And, we even had to eat in separate dining rooms. Black medical students they couldn't eat with the white medical students.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was just the way it was then. But that was not a major issue for me, because my idea was I didn't come to medical school to eat white people. I'd never eaten with white people. I came to medical school to learn to be a good doctor.
Mhm.
And when I saw that my brother, who had a ruptured appendix, had to sit in a white doctor's waiting room all day until he's seen all of his white patients. At the end of the day, he saw him for his ruptured appendix. He couldn't put him in any hospital. And so he had to, my brother obviously had severe peritonitis. His abdomen was markedly distended. So he lanced it, opened it, the way you do a hog, but that's the way. And so my brother, he went home, got well, and he had my mom pulling out this big tube out of his abdomen each day. He got well, and my brother became a veterinarian. And so we asked him about why he became a veterinarian. But he thought that was the way you treat people. So, and so it's been a long journey, but you can't think about it while you're going through it. Otherwise, you can't make it.
Dr. Elders, one of the things that you say that's very impactful, and when you talk about your experience of going to college, is that you actually had been kind of taught that really the only thing you could do was work in a store or clean houses, right?
Right.
And you say, you can't be what you can't see. And that the impact of going to school and meeting, people who had, preceded you, who had gone to medical school, was so impactful in your life. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about this idea of you can't be what you can't see.
Well, I think, and I really believe that. However, there are some people who may have. See, I had never seen a doctor until I came to Philander Smith. So I didn't know, because the doctor that put the drain in my brother's abdomen, he was 40 years old. So I didn't. And my mom was pulling it out a little bit every day to keep it open, because that was how it was being treated. But when you think of children, you want them to go and be be different things. Well, if the only thing you've ever seen is drugging and fighting and other. Well, that's what you've seen, and so that's what you do. But I had never seen a doctor. But I saw Dr. Edith Irby Jones. She was the first Black. She happened to be a woman to attend the University of Arkansas, and she came over and spoke at Philander Smith. And she talked about the difference between the high roads and the low. She said, in between on the misty paths, the rest walk to and fro. I thought, first of all, she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. But secondly, I think I never forgot her. And from that day on, I was a sophomore in college. From that day forward, all I could dream of, I wanted to be just like Dr. Jones, or Dr. Irby at the time. And whatever I had to do, whatever sacrifices I had to make, none seemed too great to get in the road of preventing me from getting there. If something came up, it's just you have to work your way around it, and you have to do what you need to do to get there. And that's just how I thought.
So,
You
Dr.
have to
Wheaton,
have a mentor, and you have to have somebody that's ahead of you to have a path. And as I said, I spent the rest of my life trying to be just like Dr. Jones.
so Dr. Wheaton and Stuart, I'd love to hear, because you've had an opportunity to spend so much time with Dr. Elders, some of the qualities and the attributes and what has inspired you in the time you've spent with her.
Well, first of all, I'm thinking about, I have several quotations from people who've donated to the movie, and I think I would like to read one of them. This one's from Deborah Santana. Dr. Joycelyn Elders is an American treasure. Her advocacy work for sex and reproductive education changed the lives of thousands of young people of color. I am in love with her courage, her honest evaluation of how to protect and save lives, and her career as Surgeon General. I mean, that's a great summation, and it's so much what I experience every time I'm with Dr. Elders. I'm inspired by her work, her impact, but also her personal kindness. I mean, Stuart and I and the film crew invaded her home, and she's just very gracious about it. There doesn't seem to be
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. I feel like an honored guest. So I'm going to let you say something about this, Stuart, from your perspective.
You're on mute, Stuart.
Apologies, my dog was wandering around the living room, and rather than having everyone hear Frisco tap dance, I put myself on mute for a second. I think that, we're storytellers. We're making a film about Dr. Elders' story. And I find that each time we kind of get to her impact in the world, she was responsible for reducing teenage pregnancy in Arkansas by, an extraordinary amount.
The world, 56%.
Say that again?
For all the world, not just me, but because we reduced teenage pregnancy 56% in the world.
Dr. Elders puts her money where her mouth is. She really, and you can only imagine in a place like Arkansas, which now that it's, gone sort of back to a conservative government, there are very restrictive abortion laws. There's rollback of child labor laws. And this is kind of the milieu that Dr. Elders figured out how to operate in. And she really made an impact in people's lives. And it's how she ended up going from Arkansas to the White House, because she really makes a difference. And so, you know, there's not a lot of people who can, you know, come into a political world that's very divided and, you know, kind of maneuver in that with a lot of principle. And I think her principles are part of what I admire a lot. You know, she doesn't sugarcoat it. Some people do. It's scary to be in the middle of a situation where you're literally in danger. And Dr. Elders won't really talk that much about it unless she's asked. But I find that she's able to kind of work from this place of really deep principle and risk. You know, she can tell you at some point during this conversation, we probably should take a minute, what happened when she was kind of pushed out of the White House and pushed out of Washington. And I think that probably also does have a lot to do with her being not just a controversial Surgeon General, but a Black woman who is a controversial Surgeon General. I'm not sure that would have happened, you know, under other circumstances. So she's a lot of courage. And, you know, and you see over the course of a career that really matters. And I think it's part of the reason why we want to make this film is, you know, we're living in a very divided society. And Dr. Elders is one of the people who kind of calls it out. And, you know, she makes sure that she, you know, stands up for the people who have the least and who need support and help the most. And I really do admire that and want people to know.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. I mean, from afar, as I've followed your career and your life, something I've always admired is your willingness to speak truth to power, to speak truth to ignorance, and to accept that there might be consequences, but you're coming from the right place. You're coming from a good place, and I'd love to have you share about where does that come from, and how do you have the trust to know that at the end of the day it's the right thing to do and you're going to be okay?
You know, you've asked a question I guess I really never thought about a lot, because I always feel, as you know, as my mother, who only had an 8th grade education, always says, always tell the truth. Says, and the day you see the truth and cease to speak is the day you begin to die. I think most people feel I'm going to live a long time. So I really feel that I saw some injustices. I was never a real civil service activist. I was never out there but I really felt very strongly that if I wanted to get out of the cotton patch, this is what my mom always said, you've got to get something in your head. So that meant that I had to try and get an education. In school, my teachers, we were really taught, you know, in a very small rural school. Our home economics teachers, and I had, 7 or 8 years of home economics, you know, but the thing that we taught, I tell everybody now, I say, I'm the very best maid I know. Well, you know, I know all, but we were, our home economics teacher, it was that make sure you train your girls to be good maids. We knew how to set tables, we had teas, you know, we were, and yeah, and to us at that time, even being a good maid was better than picking cotton or being out in the cotton patch. So you see, it was our perspective, but the thing that I always hoped and wanted to be able to do, if I could have gotten out of the cotton patch and gotten a job as a sales clerk at the Dillard store, I would have felt that I would have accomplished a world's goal. I know that I accomplished much more than that, or I feel that I accomplished much more than that. But you know, it's kind of where you set your goals. And I was always out there feeling I've got to do what I've got to do to get where I want to go. And I didn't always know where I wanted to go. But you know, every time as you move up, you know, you have to reset your goals a little higher. So, you know, I wanted to be a laboratory technician. So you're always doing a little bit more. And when I was in research, I remember we were doing some research using chicken cartilage, and I was go home be telling my dad about this research and all that, and so people would ask my dad, says, "Well, what did your what did your daughter do?" So, well, she said she was a doctor, but all I ever hear about is about these eggs and these chickens, and I thought she knew how to take care of chickens before she left the farm. But you know, it's kind of where you're thinking, and you know, and I think that when I was going through my confirmation, and you know, and the one of the senators, you know, who really, you know, wanted to kind of put down some of the things that I was talking about and that I had done. Well, you know, I didn't really think of that. I just thought, well, that's what you have to do. And you just do that and keep going. And they were saying, well, you didn't talk back to the senators. Well, I felt if they were off on the wrong track, I need to make sure they got back on the right track.
Well, going back to a quote that you shared, you can't be what you can't see. From my perspective, it's having the mentors that you described. It's having people that can expand your vision, but you also have to be able to want to see what's shown. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, you have to open your eyes. But one of the things that you have to, I think, put deep was in me was drive, and I wanted to make sure that I got out of the cotton patch, and I never wanted to go back. So that's a kind of driver that you know, I know what it's like down there. I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to work from sun up to sundown. I didn't want to go back. Whatever I needed to do, whatever I had to do, you know, that was honest and legal. That's what I wanted to do. And that's what I was willing to make the sacrifice to get done.
But Stuart and Sunny, anything else before we invite Jim back into the conversation that you want to make sure we cover and would like to share, or things you want our audience to know about?
Well, I see that somebody was asking about, does Dr. Elders have a husband or children? She does have a great story about how she met her husband. She might.
Oh, yes, I have a husband, a wonderful husband. We've only been married for 60 plus years. There aren't days that I don't want to pinch his head off and tell God he died. But most of the time, I want to keep him. And so I have 2 sons And I met my husband when I was still a medical student. I was invited to come over to examine, I was sent over rather, to examine his basketball team that was going to play a game that night. And so I went over, and when I got over, they weren't going to let me in. And so I told the young man who came, I said, well, if you don't let me in, you won't get your boys examined because I'm the doctor. Well, if you can imagine, at that time, the idea of a woman doctor coming over to examine them, they felt, well, there ain't no woman going to examine me. But my husband then, he said, well, I'll be first. And so my husband was, he came and he got examined first, and he came out and he told the guys, well, she examined, I got mine. And he was doing it because they had to have the exam done before they could play. They would let them play the team that night. And so I examined the team, and for my pay for that, they gave me a pass to the basketball games. And so my husband said, he said, well, not my husband then. He said, when they gave him the pass, he said, well, I'll take it to her. And so I told him, well, if he was going to come to take me, to bring me to the pass, well, I would come to the game. And so I went to the game, and well, I've been going to basketball games ever since. I only knew him from nearly Thanksgiving. We got married February 14th. So you can see how I didn't know him very long, but it was the best decision I ever made. So he's, and I didn't know basketball from a football at the time, but I learned quickly. I rode the school buses, and I've written up in the sports pages talking about that if you wanted to know who Coach Elder's wife is, go to the games, you'll find out that she's the person that's screaming all the time. One of the referees wanted to know, so, Miss Elders, what do you know about? I said, I don't know a thing. I don't know whether they're calling it right or wrong. I said, if it's against Coach Elders, it's wrong. So that was my interpretation of right and wrong.
Dr. Elders, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My parents were married for just 66 years before my father passed. So I honor anyone that can stay with anybody else for that long.
People always ask me, well, how do you do that? I said, you have to remember the marriage is not 50-50. I said, forget this 50-50 business. I said, it's 100% all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I want to say, if you go to visit Dr. Elders and Coach Elders, usually Coach Elders at some point in the conversation will say, would you like to have a poem? Can I give you a poem? And he has a litany of poetry that he has memorized. And so you can name a poem. Well, how about Kubla Khan? And off he goes. He'll recite Kubla Khan. And it's great fun. It's really great fun to have Coach Elders give you a poem.
Dr. Elders, I'd love to focus on something that was very meaningful to me, because I was a young man when you were Surgeon General, and would love to have you tell us the story of your resignation.
Yes.
Because I think that was of singular importance, because it raised the issues. Frankly, I didn't even know there was a Surgeon General. And then I began to hear reports of the Surgeon General starting to talk about drug legalization and sex education and contraceptives. And I can remember my parents who were
Masturbation.
evangelical Christians were upset. And then finally, you were talking about masturbation. And then Leon Panetta, who was the chief of staff to Bill Clinton, was clearly very upset, and you were forced to resign. And I just wonder, and it was at that moment, you know, as a young man, first of all, I was cheering that finally somebody up there was telling the truth about what was real to us, but also the fact that you were forced to resign in such a, I would say, impolite manner also made me feel cynical about what happens to people at your level when they actually say something that's true or relevant to public health. And the fact that you were also a Black woman made it even more complicated, but it was an event that I've never forgotten. And because you made sex education and contraception and these related issues very real in my mind, and actually started my thinking around the legalization of drugs. So I really want to thank you, but I would love to hear your story of how that all transpired.
Well, thank you very much. You know, you don't always know of how it all transpired, but you have to know that I truly believe. You have to know what you believe in and stick to it, as far as I'm concerned. And I always say, even if I later find out, you know, I might believe in something that's wrong. If I do, I don't mind coming back and admitting that I was wrong about that. But yeah, I believe that, you know, we have more young people, in fact, in jail related to, you know, marijuana use, not even hard drug use. More young Black men in
Totally.
prison related to marijuana use than, and so I felt that we need to educate our young people about sex, educate them about drug use, and we need to educate not only our children, we have to educate our parents, educate our teachers, educate our preachers. We're sexual beings, as far as I'm concerned, from the day we're born until the day we die. And we need to admit that. And, you know, and most of the problems we have with sexuality is really related to sexual ignorance, not sex education. And so that was one of the things. And I also felt very strongly, and that, you know, marijuana is not nearly as toxic, and does not cause nearly as much problem as whiskey or alcohol. But we legalized alcohol, and that's all right. But I had no problem saying, let's legalize marijuana. Now, I didn't say legalize everything, but I said that, but I felt that we could legalize marijuana or not lock up all of our bright young people related to marijuana use. So that, and so when I was asked to resign, you know, I said what I was talking about was that A, B, C, D of how can we prevent AIDS? That was what kind of got things set off. You know, A, abstinence. B, be faithful. Well, you know how faithful the country is. C, use latex condoms. You know, we talked about condoms. And D, do other things. Those other things was, you know, masturbation. Well, you know, all of a sudden, it was that we thought that everybody in the world was going to go crazy or going to go blind. I said, you know, if you masturbate, you'll go crazy or you'll go blind. I said, if that were true, 90% of the men in this country would be blind, and 80% of the women would be blind. So let's just be open and honest about the facts, and tell our children and give them the facts. And so I've really worked hard since leaving the White House on sexuality education. And then they were saying, well, teaching people how to have sex has nothing to do with teaching people how to have sex. As far as I'm concerned, God taught us how to have sex. So we don't need to do that. And well, but of course, that all of a sudden this became a major issue. But I didn't think it was an issue. And I didn't really think I said anything wrong. And
Yeah,
when
but
we talk about drug use, I felt that we're locking up bright young Black men for minor drug use. Marijuana. Yeah, the problem with them using drugs with smoking pot is the reason why more Blacks were in jail for smoking pot was because the only place they had to go was the street, and the police knew where to pick them up from the street, and they was trying to fill up. And the fact is they was trying to fill up their jails to support their jails. It wasn't really, about taking care of hardened criminals. This was my perception of what was going on at the time. And I think Bill Clinton was I think he was having his own problems at the time. I do not feel that he was that upset with anything I said. I know that he heard everything I said before, because I've been saying the same things in Arkansas. And even some of the old senators here in Arkansas, whose hair was as white as mine now at the time. He told me, he said, "Doctor, have we done what you told us to do 30 years ago, we wouldn't be having this problem now."
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Jim, because that really is the core question. I'm just wondering, Dr. Elders, how you feel about the public conversation that's taking place right now, and what your thoughts and advice to the rest of us would be, because it does seem like, Jim asking that question, we're still kind of dealing with these same issues and controversies. And again, I think it is really important for people to hear from you about what you're thinking, because you were so prescient in the 90s, and here we are still dealing with these same problems and issues.
I think we're still dealing with the same problems and issues is because we've never admitted them. We've kept them in the closet. We've been silent about those issues. And I worked very hard on, we established a chair at the University of Minnesota in my name, really dealing with sexuality and gender issues, and to deal with sexual education. And I'll never forget on an airplane, I'm always talking, but I was talking, one of the pilots asked, he says, "Doctor, where are you going?" And I told him I was going someplace. He said, "What are you going to talk about?" I said, "I'm going to talk about sex," just like that. And I said, I said, "Do you know the 3 Ps of sexuality?" And he said, "Well, no, what are you going to say?" And so I said, the 3 Ps are that we have to deal with sex. It's pleasure, prevention, and procreation. And so I said, and so I told him, I said, well, procreation, I said, not every sperm was meant to be a baby. And I said, we always want to make sure we keep ourselves and our partners safe. I said 99.9% of sex is really about pleasure. He said, doctor, you need to add some more nines to that. Well, but so I'm just saying that we all need to understand that it's really about most sex is about pleasure and relationships and all, and it's really not. You know, we talk about it's for procreation. We all want to have as many babies as we want to have, and somebody want to have 20 children. I have no problem with that. Just make sure you can parent and take care of 20 children. But I also think that we shouldn't spend people having unplanned, unwanted children. And the best way to do that is we've got to educate them and to have sexual health education. We don't need to teach them the how to. They'll learn that. They know that. But yet we need to teach them how to have healthy sex.
You're priceless. You are priceless.
Right?
You see why we want to make this documentary.
Yes.
See why. This is the reason why. She is priceless. She's a national treasure.
And Dr. Elders, just to extend Stuart's question to you about current issues, two just come immediately to mind. One is the erosion of Roe v. Wade, and now the assault on women's right in terms of sovereignty around reproduction in their bodies. And the other is the assault on gender fluidity and the trans phenomenon, shall we say, that is present in world culture, and particularly here in the United States. Speak to us about these issues that are currently challenging us.
Well, you know, I never thought that we would overturn Roe v. Wade. I never did. And I said that if we ever did that, the women in this country would rise up and fight, and politicians would regret that they ever did it. They haven't. We overturned Roe v. Wade, and I'm very upset about it. I feel a lot of women in this country are very upset about it. See, nobody want to go back to where we were, because I remember I was a doctor when young women were coming into the emergency room from botched abortions and infected and dying. So I remember that. They were far more likely to be young, poor, and not, really the call them coat hanger abortion. So let me just say, see, I remember when that was going on. And so I was thrilled to death. But, if we would work and concentrate and think about healthy sexuality education, I've never known a woman to want or need an abortion that was not already pregnant. So I'm saying that we've got to make sure that we're dealing with, if we prevented unplanned, unwanted pregnancies, we wouldn't have the issue of abortion would never come up. So I'm saying, and we want to educate our children. Nobody want their teenager or young child to end up pregnant when she didn't want to be pregnant. I'm saying if she's married and wants to be pregnant, that's her business. That's not what abortion is about. So I'm saying that we need to make sure we educate our people and teach them how to have safe, sexuality. they have all these ideas about condoms. Well, they'll say condoms will break. Well, I want them to always know that the vows of abstinence break far more easily than does a latex condom. Our people, our young children, in the heat of ecstasy, well, you just we end up making. I won't say there were mistakes, but I'm saying we need to teach our young people very early, and we've got to do that, and and we can't decide we're gonna teach them at that last minute. That's too little, too late. And I'll never forget the young story of a minister's granddaughter. She was going to. They were all told on to come as who you want to be, dress as who you want to be on this day. She wanted to come dressed, of all things, as Dr. Elders. So grandmother made her this Surgeon General uniform, and they only grandparents would go to such extremes. But when her husband came in that night, she said, John, you've got to go out and go to the drugstore. And it was pouring down rain. And he said, what do I have to go to the drugstore for? So you've got to go and get some condoms for. This was the granddaughter who was living with them. And so the granddaddy said, well, what do you need with condom? She said, well, I'm going as Dr. Elders. And Dr. Elders said, you never go out on a date without a condom in your purse. So she's 8 years old now. And the granddaddy he says, honey, give me the keys. He went and got one and went out in the rain to the group. But I'm just saying, you've got to be able to talk about it openly and honestly. And that's what we've not done. And that's what I want to do. I want every young child to have comprehensive sexuality education from kindergarten through the 12th grade.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been brilliant and moving and inspiring, and love the workings of your mind, Dr. Elders. Love.
My mind is not working very well anymore.
So, Tom, why don't you close us out and make whatever comments you'd like to make and tee us up for tomorrow.
Sure. Dr. Elders, it's such an honor to have you with us today. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story, your life's journey with us. It's been mentioned several times. You're a national treasure, and we're delighted to have you share with us today. Sunny, thank you for making this possible, and thank you for your work. And Stuart, really looking forward to the film, and can't wait to have it shared with America, because people need to know beyond what the little bits of information we know about Dr. Elders and her key messages and her life story. So thank you both for making that happen. Tomorrow we're gonna continue this conversation. We've been blessed with having a number of women who've been making history. Many of them are known to us. And tomorrow I'm delighted to have Michelle Coleman, who's been doing extraordinary work around attachment in particular, and helping young people and adults as well in New Mexico. And she's a national treasure in her own right and needs to be known, and her work needs to be celebrated. So it's an extension tomorrow to have Michelle with us to share a bit about her life's journey, which has been remarkable in its own right, and the work she's doing in the world. So delighted to have her with us tomorrow.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Sunny. And Dr. Elders, thank you. You are indeed a national treasure. And
It's a
we
pleasure.
are.
I didn't know what I was going to talk about today. So I just, yeah.
I have one last thing, which is we are raising money to finish this documentary. And I believe that one of your helpers put the link in the chat for people who might want to donate and become a part of this effort to bring this larger documentary that really tells the comprehensive story of Dr. Elders' life, her life's work, and the impact of her life and her life's work. So I hope those of you who feel moved will donate to this process so we can finish up, because we want to finish up and get this out there. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
And Sunny, for those watching this later, if you want to just share verbally so that people watching the video later will have a chance to know where to help support the film. Can you direct them?
Yes, I can. If they will go to the number 4 and the word giving, forgiving.com, and then type in from the cotton fields to the White House, they will find the place to donate. And all donations are tax deductible, of course, and people will be recognized for their contributions. And we are open to any kind of contribution that people will make, from very small to very large, so that we can finish our project. Forgiving.com, from the cotton fields to the White House. You have to look a little bit because they have many projects at Forgiving, and ours is just one of them that people can donate to.
And then someone just put in the chat, Sunny, that we can organize at Humanity Rising some watch parties. So keep
that
us
would be
informed.
wonderful. Yes.
When it comes out. Do you have a sense of when it's coming out?
What do you
Not
think?
yet, but hopefully soon.
Cool. So probably maybe sometime in late 2024. Anyway, keep us informed, and Forgiving, from the cotton fields to the White House, everyone. Look that up, make a contribution, and then we'll do a watch party or two when the documentary comes out. So thank you.
And it's in the chat. The full thing is in the chat, which makes it even easier.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. This brings our session to a close. We've been graced today with Dr. Jocelyn Elders, truly a national treasure. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box, and then we'll see all of you tomorrow for our 5th and final session on how women's histories have changed the world. Thank you all so much. Bye for now.